we're seeing some of the highest level of U.S. tariffs since the 1930s. What are you making of the numbers we're seeing so far?
Well, I do think they're extraordinary. I mean, if you look at this, again, this is the largest tax increase we've imposed in the United States in many, many decades. And as you said, bringing tariff levels back to the level we have not seen since the early 1930s. If you look at Asia alone, I mean, when Trump came into office, the average tariff on Asian goods coming into the United States was 4.8%. When this is done, these tariffs are done, if we just stop with what we've got right now, we're at 27%. So it is extraordinary. The other thing that's really extraordinary about it is most of all of these tariffs are being done basically unlawfully. I mean, they violate all of the United States' commitments, that it made to other countries as part of the World Trade Organization, but they also violate U.S. law. Again, a president is not allowed to impose tariffs other than under very specific procedures with very specific evidence for why they're imposing the tariffs that have to be related in some way to trade. And as you just showed, the tariffs on Brazil have nothing to do with trade or with trade deficits or with anything going on in the international economic economy. They're pure revenge. And the president doesn't really have the lawful authority to do that.
Jennifer, so what? So what if the tariffs are against the law? I mean, we know that President Trump has a way of circumnavigating all these laws. And what's the recourse for countries anyways?
Well, I think your question raises two really important issues. One is, what's the recourse for countries? Because if you look at a lot of these countries, they have been negotiating with the United States. I mean, many of them offering to buy lots of things from the United States. Japan saying, we'll take a lot of your LNG. Indonesia offering to buy $34 billion of U.S. crops and fuels. Thailand proposing to lower a lot of its trade barriers. So they thought they were doing exactly what Trump said when he said he was going to get 90 deals in 90 days. And yet here they get these letters saying, oh, no, never mind. Unless you conclude a deal by August 1st, these tariffs are going to go on you. And virtually none of them even know what is possible for them to conclude a deal. So the huge problem is, again, a lack of trust with our trading partners, a real sense of exasperation from all of them of what is it going to take in order to sort of move away from this. And on the legal side of it, for what it's worth, a lot of these tariffs under this so-called International Economic Emergency Powers Act have been being challenged in the U.S. courts. And so far, 2 courts already have ruled just no. You cannot impose these tariffs under this law, and that's the law Trump has used. Those cases are on very expedited appeals. I personally would expect appeals decisions and potentially even a Supreme Court decision before the end of the year. And I am one of the people that thinks that Trump simply does not have the authority to do what he is doing. The U.S. Constitution gives to the Congress, not the president, the power to impose tariffs. And here we're looking at the largest set of tariff increases, that we've seen, again, in nearly 100 years, none of them being authorized or supported by the Congress.
When you take a look at the tariff levels being imposed on countries, you get a sense, and I doubt people will disagree, that negotiations actually failed. The crux of the matter really, Jennifer, is that the goalposts keep changing. First, it is about addressing the deficit. Then it's about, putting a lid on Chinese exports. Then it is about security concerns. Then it's about some other things. So it is a very difficult and challenging environment to be negotiating a trade deal.
I couldn't agree with you more. And the problem is many of the goals that the Trump administration has said for these tariffs are absolutely in total contrast and conflict with each other. I mean, on the one hand, they say the goal is to raise revenue. Well, if what you really want to do in terms of raising revenue is you want steady, low-level tariffs so that you continue to import a lot and charge tariffs on those, then the next thing they say is, oh no, we want everybody to return all manufacturing to the United States. Well, again, if you want to return all manufacturing to the United States, what you do not want is all of the chaos and the uncertainty that they've created, because all that means is all of the investors are sitting, parking their money, not willing to invest because they don't know what the economic situation is going to be even tomorrow. So even their goals are not consistent with each other. And obviously, if your goal is to get rid of the United States trade deficit, what you do not do is put a 50% tariff on Brazil, a country with whom we run a surplus. You do not put big tariffs on countries like Bangladesh that are least developed countries. And so part of the reason they're running a trade deficit with the United States is they can't afford to buy expensive American products. But if you put this big tariff on them, you're only going to make them poorer, less likely to buy more American products, less likely to bring down their trade deficit. So if that's the goal, these tariffs make no sense.
Is it about closing the back door?
Yes, I think there is a big element of saying, wait a minute, we do not want all of the Chinese goods that were made with subsidies, that were made in violation of, taking U.S. intellectual property or taking U.S. technology. We want to make sure that none of those goods can come into the U.S. market via any other market, via any other producer. And so, yes, I think to some significant degree, that's one of the goals. You see that, for example, they did get a sort of agreement, or at least the beginning of an agreement with Vietnam, where Vietnam would accept a 20% tariff, but a 40% tariff on anything that was so-called transshipped. And again, I think what they mean by that, and we'll have to wait and see when the details come out, is anything that contains a substantial amount of components made in China. So I do think you're exactly right that some of this is trying to figure out a way to put tariffs on everyone that is potentially using Chinese inputs in their goods.
As you said, it is about definition. Transshipment is one. The other is anti-American. Any clarity on that? Do we expect clarity, given that, a lot of people are saying that even the Trump administration itself isn't clear on those definitions?
We don't know either of them. Again, normally transshipment, as a term, it's been out there for a long time. A lot of us trade negotiators know that term very well. It normally just means, did you cheat? I mean, were the goods entirely made somewhere else and you sewed in a label that said it was made in somewhere else? I mean, that's what we used to think of as transshipment, is just trying to cheat on the rules of origin. I don't think that's what they're talking about. I think they're talking about, again, this notion of if it has significant Chinese components. And again, what does it mean to be anti-American at this point? They're not defining this. If they're going to say that anybody that's doing business with China is anti-American, again, that's never going to work, given particularly the amount of trade that we're doing in Asia, where a number of the largest Asian countries, Japan, Korea, and others, their primary markets are in and out of China. And many of even the developing countries within Asia use a lot of inputs, need a lot of inputs from China. So again, I don't think there is no definition at this point. Nobody really knows what they mean. And again, you think about what that basically says, is that we're going to bifurcate the world, and we're going to fragment all of the trading systems into these blocks of kind of with America or not with America. That has huge costs. I mean, the IMF and the WTO have estimated that if we do that, bifurcate the world into these different blocks, just the bifurcating alone will cost 7 to 15% of global GDP growth for countries. So it's a very dangerous road to go down to say that we're going to separate everyone into these different blocks. And you cannot unwind global supply chains as quickly as they seem to think they could be unwound.
Jennifer, we know that countries must be pretty exasperated with negotiations, but in the end, they do not really have a choice. They have to go along with what the U.S. is asking them to do. Isn't that true?
Well, again, it's not at all clear, kind of what these deals are going to be. To date, we have one agreement with the United Kingdom. And again, it has a number of elements in it, but not necessarily ones that I think would apply in many other countries. So we really don't know where that kind of an agreement is leading. We, again, have this beginnings of an agreement with Vietnam. I'm told that we may or may not get an agreement any moment now with India or the European Union. But again, I think if you look at what's in the deal so far, they're more or less kind of keeping the status quo, not necessarily going to these very high tariff levels. And most of what the countries are pushing for is if we have to accept a 10% across the board tariff, okay, maybe we'll do that. But we then want exclusions from the tariffs on steel or aluminum, 50% tariffs, or we want an exclusion for our cars. Or if you're now going to be doing this 50% tariff on copper, some countries want exclusions from that. If you're going to be bringing new tariffs on pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, any number of the products that are in the queue, if you will, to potentially get tariffs, countries are trying to say we need an exclusion from that, or we need what the UK got in autos, which is the first 100,000 cars comes in at only a 10% tariff before the big 25% tariff kicks in.